Hello, I'm Miles Pewitt, and I'll be your StudyWorks SAT Virtual Classroom teacher. Our virtual program will provide you with an excellent way to prepare for all three subjects found on the SAT: the math, the reading, and the writing. The virtual program takes about 35 hours to complete and is composed of 28 distinct units. These units are composed of pretest, videos, and homework assignments. The good news is that all of this can be completed on your computer anytime you want and at whatever pace is comfortable. All problems are thoroughly analyzed, and you'll find them tremendously beneficial regardless of your skill level. The most important thing you need to know about the program is this: we are different. Some SAT prep companies think that the SAT is a test of knowledge. Thus, they prepare you by rambling endlessly about formulas, definitions, and grammar. I think this is both boring and a waste of your time. Unlike other programs, I won't do this. Merely knowing what a word means, what a formula does, or what a grammar rule applies will not necessarily improve your SAT score. I believe that you have to learn to do better on the test by reviewing the test itself. We're the only prep group that does that. We call this the CASE method. What is the CASE method? Well, for example, not only should you know how to do the math on, let's say, problem number 15 on the 20-question math test, you should also know the following about number 15. How much time you can spend on that question, how to do that question without using math, how to evaluate whether you should make a guess on that question or to skip it, how to double check your result. You can only do this by practicing and using our CASE method. If this method is so good, why doesn't everybody use it? Just lecturing requires you only to repeat lecture notes. Almost anybody can do that. If you're just mimicking lecture notes, all you're doing is repeating what you could have read in a book. And for the most part, that's what most SAT courses do. However, the CASE method requires an enormous amount of training. You have to know everything about every question. I've been teaching the SAT for 35 years, and I think it took me 20 of those years just to learn how to use the CASE method. The sad fact is the expertise needed for the lecture method is easy, and the expertise needed for the CASE method is rare. We have it, they don't. To give you a better idea of what I'm talking about, I'm going to take a few snippets from our virtual program so you can see what we do in the program and see how it's so much different than the way you might expect an SAT course to be. If you look at this, there's a lot of ways of doing this mathematically. Most of them are not really useful. I mean, you could make ABX and BD2X and so forth and work it out, but that's really not going to solve your problem. So let's try a different method. We'll try to go beyond both algebra and geometry to solve this, at least a little bit beyond those. What portion of this rectangle that is shaded, and the blue part is shaded, and you can tell it's more than half. You could guess, but I don't think that's the best way of doing it. They tell you that one side is twice the size of the other, so we're just going to make this a 2x4 rectangle. The reason we're making it 2x4 is we've already learned we can make geometry anything we want as long as we don't violate the rules. AF is indeed twice the size of AB, and that's required in this. What we can do with that is figure out what the total area is. If we want to know what portion the shaded part is, we have to know the total area. That's 8. The first thing I want to do is divide up the 4 into two parts, BC and CD. They tell us in the problem are equal. They look equal, so we can assume it. Again, that's another thing we've learned. If it looks it, we can do it. So BC and CD are in fact equal. So how does that help us? Well, one thing we can do is now we can look at the square. It's a 2x2 square, and you can tell from the 2x2 square that half of that area is going to be 2, because the 2x2 square has an area of 4, so that yellow part there has to be half of it, or 2. If you notice what we're doing, we're taking sections of this. This bottom thing here is obviously a 2 by 1 rectangle. It's completely shaded, so that area is 2. And we have a rectangle on the top that's a 1 by 2 rectangle. The whole thing would be 2, but the part that is shaded is only half of it, so it has an area of 1. We've just been arbitrary about this. We could have used different numbers, we could have used different shapes, but any of them would have given the right answer. Once you have that information, you can figure out that you have a shaded area of 2, and the pink gives you another shaded area of 2, and the green gives you a shaded area of 1. If you add those up, you find that the shaded area is in fact 5. So we don't really need this color anymore, so we know that the whole shaded area is 5. And they've already told us that the total area was 8, or we at least derived that. So we know that the shaded part to everything is 5 out of 8, or 5/8. Of course, you would enter that in on the test as 5/8, and you would be correct. Pretty clever. On the SAT, you have 2 types of reading questions. One of these types of questions are called sentence completions. A lot of students don't like these because they're very vocabulary intensive. Let's show you how we deal with that. Number 3 is a level 3. That means it's a question of average difficulty. Typical of number 3s, it has a little bit of a issue in syntax and a little bit of an issue in semantics. Let's look at the semantic issues first. Circumspect comes from 2 Latin words. Circum meaning around, spect means to look, spectare. We use both words in many ways. Circumference meaning round, spect as in spectator or spectacular or spectacles, to look. If you look around, you're probably being careful, and that's generally what circumstance means. Fervor is an interesting word, again from the Latin. It means great warmth or being very honest and earnest. It comes to us from the French, but again, if you go further back, it comes from Latin. And actually, fervent or fervent or actually meant heat. So we use the word in a metaphorical way. With warmth, does not mean that you're hot. It means that you literally have emotional warmth. In choice C, you have the word equanimity. Comes again from Latin. We get the word equa, which means equal. Most people know that. The last part of the word comes from animus, which meant spirit. If you're of equal spirit, of calm spirit. You can find the root animus in quite a few words. Animation, and even the word animal, so something with a spirit in it. Basically means you're emotionally stable or calm, even under tension or strain. The only other word that had any level of semantic difficulty was capriciousness. Capriciousness basically means, it's usually a negative word. It means that you have whims, you are subject to erratic behavior, maybe vindictive behavior. The word is almost always used in a negative way. Strangely, it comes not from Latin, nor French, nor Greek. It comes directly from the Italian, so figure that one out. It's a word that you probably need to know if you ever get married. The other words in number 3 are quite simple. Neutral, ambition, vocal, firm, confident, outspoken. Those are all simple words. The syntax issue is not too complicated. Mayor Hardy refuses to remain silent on controversy. So you have to figure out what combination of words would a person who is refusing to be silent use. This is a bit of a cultural question. How does somebody deal with refusing to remain silent? I suppose that somebody raised in Europe or the United States might deal with this a little bit differently than somebody who's raised in the South Seas or in parts of Asia. So there is a cultural context to the SAT. They don't like to admit that, but there is one. If you're refusing to remain silent, you're probably firm and outspoken, and those are easy words, and you can understand the cultural context of this. Number 3 was not so hard. For many students, the biggest bugaboo on this test is the reading, especially the longer reading passages. As you can tell on this next little part, you can't bring in the reading skills that you learned at school and think they'll work on the SAT. Let's show you how we do it. This is number 15. It asks, the sensations, line 7, might best be described as feelings of, and then they give you 5 choices. Note that all 5 choices deal with emotions of some sort: anger, bitterness, reverence, gratitude, dejection, isolation, nostalgia, serenity, empathy, and concern. All are emotions. I'd like to remind you that there are 4 types of questions: main idea questions, vocabulary questions, inference questions, and tone questions. This is an excellent example of a tone question. Tone normally deals with some sort of emotional aspect of the passage. And as you will find on main idea questions and inference questions, tone questions can't be found as a detail in the passage or the passages. It's something that you have to gather by inference or by some conclusion. It's simply never stated. You cannot find it. The only thing that you can find in the passage is reading vocabulary questions. We won't see a reading vocabulary question until we get to number 24. What do we know about tone questions other than they deal with emotions? Well, we know several things. First of all, on literature readings or ethnic readings, there's generally 2, maybe 3 tone questions that appear. We also know that tone cannot be deciphered by looking only at the literal meaning of words. Often, tone has a cultural aspect. Think of this example. Let's suppose that you read a sentence that said this: Bob is going to marry Sue. Immediately after that sentence, in quotes, you find this word, really? There's an enormous difference of what the meaning of the word really is, and in oral communication, it is not hard to decipher what the word really means. Bob is going to marry Sue. Really? 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 In oral communication, the word really might be a confirmation. It might be a question. Really? It might be a surprise. It might mean a lot of things, but it rarely means just a confirmation that you know and understand reality. The problem with the SAT is that you're reading it. You only see words. You don't hear the words. So you have to interpret the words based on your own concept of culture and your own concept of how people react in situations. This is difficult, especially with tone questions. So the point is this: you can't just go back to line number 7 and read that sentence, read the sentence that has the word sensations, and find the answer. You have to find the answer by the totality of that paragraph, sometimes the totality of the passage, and you have to make guesses about how people react under certain situations. That's the only way you can get a tone question. It comes from the outside. It comes from your own heart. It does not come from the words themselves. The writing section of the SAT is one of the easiest sections. You can get vast improvement. It's also one of the few parts of the SAT that actually help you in real life. There are 3 distinct types of multiple choice questions on the writing. You will also have to complete a 25-minute essay question. In this next part, we will discuss one question that occurs, the error identification question. In our conversational speech, not our formal writing, we tend to throw pronouns around very loosely because you more or less can sort things out in your mind what somebody means. However, the SAT writing is a test of formal grammar skills, so you can't do that. In formal writing, you have to be very specific with pronouns. The SAT will pose 3 distinct types of pronoun problems on the test: ambiguity, case, and number. Let's look at examples of each of these. At this point in the lecture, I spend approximately 20 minutes on describing the 3 types of pronoun problems. We'll skip that here and go to the actual problem. Now, let's look at our problem, number 26. In this problem, you had the pronoun there listed in the underlined portion of B, and it refers to the firefly. This is the reverse of our example. In this particular case, you have a plural pronoun. There refers to several things, but the firefly refers to only a single thing. So instead of saying an area under their abdomen, should be under its. So the correct answer there is B. You have to be very careful with pronouns on the test and always ask yourself, is the pronoun being used ambiguously? Is the pronoun being used in the wrong case? Or is it being used with the wrong number? Let's go on to 27. I hope this has given you some idea of what the course is like. If you have any other questions, please give us a call at 1-800-783-1728. Thanks for listening.